Rich millionaire husband left dinner with his pregnant wife for Mistress. She caught him in the act. A lavish dinner, a clink of wine glasses, and a glowing chandelier overhead. Jessica Harrington believed her marriage was sealed in the graceful folds of that perfect evening. Her husband, Michael Harrington, had meticulously planned this night at the illustrious Domaine Lavish, the most exclusive restaurant in town. As the servers poured vintage Bordeaux into crystal goblets, Jessica's heart brimmed with anticipation. But in a shocking twist, Michael vanished mid-course, leaving her confused and alone. When her phone rang, and the cryptic text message from an unknown number buzzed in, the evening turned from celebratory to sinister. This is their story. Jessica Harrington leaned back in her plush velvet chair at Domaine Lavish, admiring the gold filigree on her dessert spoon. Although she'd accompanied her husband, Michael, to exclusive restaurants before, something about this place felt different, almost magical. Their table, strategically located near a floor-to-ceiling window, offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Jessica's gaze took in the glittering lights that stretched endlessly into the night, reminding her how far she and Michael had come from their humble beginnings. She remembered the first meal they ever shared as a couple nearly 10 years ago. They were both fresh out of college, short on cash, and had grabbed cheap Chinese takeout from a hole-in-the-wall place near campus. Yet the memory remained as sweet as the fortune cookies they'd shared. Now, as Michael reclined with a suave confidence, wearing a tailored navy suit that cost more than their first year's rent, Jessica felt both pride and a tinge of nostalgia. Wealth had brought them many comforts, but had it cost them something deeper? Michael's phone buzzed on the table. Jessica watched him glance at the screen, his polished features tightening momentarily. When he looked up again, he plastered on a forced smile. She didn't think much of it. At first, he was a successful entrepreneur, after all, the CEO of Harrington Innovations, with a million things on his plate. But the shift in his expression lasted just long enough to sow a sliver of doubt in her mind. They sipped wine and made polite conversation about Jessica's close friend, Rachel Stone, who was recovering from knee surgery after an unfortunate skiing accident, and about Michael's upcoming conference in Milan. By all accounts, it should have been a romantic night, the perfect bonding experience to solidify their partnership, especially after recent tensions. Yet a niggling worry gnawed at Jessica. For months, she'd felt a certain distance creeping between them. Michael returned home later each night, claiming work obligations. He'd begun receiving incessant late-night texts, which he hid with casual swipes or nonchalant excuses. She tried to brush aside suspicions, attributing them to marital stress. She told herself that Michael was a faithful husband whose only vice might be an overcommitment to his business empire. Halfway through their main course, a sumptuous Chilean sea bass drizzled with truffle oil, Michael's phone buzzed again. This time, Jessica observed a faint flush crossing his cheeks. He dabbed at his mouth, placed his napkin aside and rose from the table. "Jess, I need to make a quick call." "It's urgent," he said, voice low and tight. Without waiting for her answer, he strode toward the grand foyer of the restaurant. Left alone, Jessica sipped her wine and tried to remain composed. Minutes ticked by, stretching the moment into an uncomfortable eternity. She felt her heart rate pick up. What could be so urgent that he had to rush out on their special evening? She tried to focus on the sophisticated ambience, the swirl of conversation in French or Italian from nearby tables, the gentle flicker of candlelight on her skin. But none of it could quell the uneasy flutter in her stomach. After what felt like an hour, Michael returned, looking vaguely restless. He tossed out a quick apology, mumbled something about a crisis in a London office, then sat back down. The tension between them hung in the air like an overripe fruit, ready to drop. Jessica forced a smile, determined to salvage the evening. She tried to steer the conversation to lighter topics, an upcoming charity gala for the Caldwell Foundation that she and her mother, Julia Stone, were organizing. Michael responded politely, but his mind seemed miles away. As the night wore on, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was building on the horizon, waiting to unleash chaos on their carefully curated life. When the dessert arrived, an intricately plated soufflé, the final act of the evening began. Michael's phone vibrated once more. This time, he stood without apology, muttering that he had to leave immediately. Jessica watched, baffled, as he tossed a sizable wad of cash onto the table and pressed a hasty kiss to her cheek. Then he hurried out the door, letting in a gust of cold air that chilled Jessica to the bone. For a long moment, Jessica sat in stunned silence, the sweet aroma of chocolate soufflé wafting around her. She looked at the empty seat across the table and the untouched dessert that was meant to cap their memorable evening. The hush of confusion set in, her heart banging against her ribcage. Mechanically, she pulled out her phone and checked for any messages from Michael, hoping for a quick explanation. Nothing. That was when the glimmer of her phone's screen in the low light grabbed her attention. An unknown number had sent her a message. She blinked, uncertain if it might be related to the big charity event. Jessica tapped it open. The text read, "If you want answers, come to 14th and Bergman Street, penthouse #5. Right now." Her breath caught in her throat. Who could this be? She tried calling the number, but it went to voicemail. The message was cryptic and urgent, and her mind raced with scenarios. Was Michael in trouble? Was this some twisted business scheme to lure him away from the restaurant? Anxiety spiked through her veins. A primal protective instinct for her husband battled the swirl of doubts that had been plaguing her for months. As she stepped out of the restaurant, the crisp night air slapped her cheeks. She handed the valet her ticket, and within moments, her pearl-white Bentley pulled around. She slid into the driver's seat, heart still galloping. The thought of going home and waiting for Michael felt unbearable. She needed to know if this text was legitimate, if it had anything to do with the emergency that made him leave so abruptly. She quickly typed a message to Rachel Stone, her closest friend, explaining she was following a lead about Michael and wasn't sure when she'd be back. Rachel, though still recovering from surgery, responded almost immediately, "Be careful, Jess. Let me know the minute you find anything out." With that, Jessica steered her Bentley out of Domaine Levrai's valet circle and onto the busy streets. The route to Bergman Street was congested with night owls and weekend revelers, but she navigated it as calmly as she could, though her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She recalled some of the tense moments over the past few months, Michael's vague excuses, his secretive phone calls, and how he'd grown so distant in their bed at night. Could there be a reason beyond business stress that explained his detachment? Arriving at 14th and Bergman, she parked in front of an upscale condominium tower that soared into the night sky. Despite the building's grand facade of steel and glass, a knot twisted in her stomach. She asked the doorman if there was a penthouse #5 and if her husband had arrived. The doorman, after checking her ID and verifying that her name was on the occupant's guest list, waved her in. The elevator glided up to the top floor with a soft chime at each level. Jessica's heart hammered so hard she feared it would echo in the quiet lift. She thought about calling Michael, but her pride and a latent fear of hearing something she didn't want to held her back. She needed to see this through alone. At the top floor, the penthouse hallway was hushed and plushly carpeted. The door to #5 was set at the far end of a gleaming corridor lined with modern art. Each step she took felt heavier than the last. Finally, she reached the door, noticing the subtle golden plaque that read Penthouse #5. She lifted her trembling hand to knock, but before her knuckles touched the polished surface, the door swung open. A woman with dark hair, striking green eyes, and a tight-fitting black dress stood in the threshold. Jessica's stomach clenched. The woman eyed her calmly, like she'd been expecting her. "Jessica Harrington?" she asked, her voice low and sultry. Jessica swallowed. "Yes." The woman's red lips curled into a chilling smile. "I'm Veronica Marsh. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance. Come in." Without waiting for a response, she stepped aside to let Jessica pass. Jessica stood at the doorway for a brief second, the weight of her next step pressing upon her conscience. Instinct told her to turn and run, but curiosity and fear shoved her forward. She entered, her chest tight, her mind bracing for the answers she both needed and dreaded to learn. Inside Penthouse #5, Jessica found herself in a vast living area bathed in muted golden light. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a stunning panorama of the city skyline, but Jessica couldn't focus on the view. All her attention zeroed in on Veronica Marsh, who crossed the room with a feline grace. A sleek marble table at the center held a silver champagne bucket and 2 flutes. Jessica's heart pounded as she wondered if one of them had been used moments ago by Michael. "Why am I here?" Jessica asked, voice quivering. She clenched her purse strap to anchor herself. Veronica regarded her with a cool intensity. "You're here because I thought you deserved to know the truth." She swept a hand toward the sofa, inviting Jessica to sit. Jessica refused, remaining standing, as if to maintain some measure of power in a situation that felt beyond her control. Truth about what? Jessica managed, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. Veronica's emerald eyes flickered. "About Michael. Your husband," she said. "He's been living a double life, Jessica. You've sensed it, haven't you?" The accusation hit Jessica like a physical blow. Her instincts had whispered that something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed by another woman, by this woman, was surreal. She opened her mouth to demand proof, to defend her husband, to yell, but words failed her. Veronica took her silence as permission to continue. "I've been seeing him for 6 months. It started as casual, nice dinners, late-night meetings in hotels, but it turned into something deeper." She paused to let that sink in. "I won't lie and say, I didn't know he was married. He made no secret of you, but he insisted he was. Unhappy that he'd leave you soon." A profound sense of betrayal surged through Jessica. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She tried to speak, but her throat felt constricted by shock and fury. How could Michael do this? Was this woman telling the truth, or was she some liar seeking to blackmail them? Why are you telling me this?" Jessica asked, forcing each word out carefully. "If you're with him, why expose it?" Veronica's lips twisted into a bitter half-smile. "Because love is never simple, and Michael Harrington isn't who I thought he was. He promised me things, talked about building a future, then disappeared whenever it suited him. I started suspecting he was hiding not just you, but other secrets. That's when I realized I wasn't the only woman in his life." She let that damning statement linger. Jessica closed her eyes, struggling to steady her breath. It was one thing to suspect an affair, it was another to be confronted with it so blatantly. Before she could gather her thoughts, the sound of a key rattled in the lock at the front door snapped her attention to the hallway. Michael Harrington himself stepped inside, his eyes wide with disbelief when he saw Jessica standing there. He froze, looking from Veronica to Jessica, then back to Veronica again, his face pale as though he'd just walked into a nightmare. A tremor coursed through him, and he let his briefcase slip to the floor with a heavy thud. "Jessica," he breathed, his voice laced with panic. What are you doing here?" Jessica's shoulders trembled. A swirl of confusion and anger contorting her features. Words refused to form in her mouth. Instead, she shot a burning glare at him. Veronica folded her arms, leaning against the wall with a victorious smirk, as though enjoying the show. He turned to Veronica, desperation etched on his face. "Veronica, what is this? Why would you?" The dark-haired woman cut him off. "I told you, Michael, I'm not going to be your dirty little secret. I've given you too many chances. You said you'd end things with Jessica, remember?" She eyed Jessica then, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "But since he hasn't, I decided to do it for him." A choking sound escaped Jessica as she finally found her voice. "Michael, is she telling the truth?" She flicked a tearful glance between them. Are you really involved with her?" He closed his eyes, pain and regret carving lines in his otherwise composed features. "Jess, I'm sorry. It's complicated. I never wanted you to find out this way." The confession fell like a sledgehammer, cracking the polished veneer of Jessica's life. She felt a visceral ache broom in her chest, the sense that the foundations of her world were crumbling beneath her. So many questions flashed through her mind. Why did he do this? Were their years together a lie? Was she not enough? Veronica's next words were an icy hiss that sliced through the tension. "You want to know the real reason I called you here, Jessica? Because I found out about his other mistress, and I knew right then that if he lied to me and he lied to you, there's no telling who else he's been fooling. I'm done being a pawn in his games." Jessica's knees went weak, and she sank onto the sofa, her breath ragged. Another mistress? The revelation threatened to capsize her completely. All she could do was stare at Michael, the man she once believed was her soulmate, the man who had held her hand through life's storms. In that moment, she recognized that the life they had built might be little more than a house of cards, and it was already tumbling down. The harsh light of morning found Jessica Harrington in her kitchen, numb and running on autopilot. She had left Penthouse #5 the night before in a haze, ignoring Michael's frantic pleas for her to stay and talk. She couldn't bear to look at him, not after hearing the confessions that poured out of Veronica's mouth. Now, as the sun climbed over the horizon, a cold emptiness settled in Jessica's chest. She took a deep breath and stared at her reflection in the window, puffy eyes, tear-streaked cheeks. She felt like a woman who had aged overnight. Part of her wanted to hide in bed, ignoring the reality that threatened to drown her. But an even stronger part demanded she face it head-on. Her phone buzzed insistently on the marble countertop. The first call was from Rachel Stone, worried about her friend's abrupt disappearance the night before. Jessica answered with a trembling voice, promising to explain everything soon. Next came a call from a name that made Jessica's heart constrict. Michael. She let it ring, her mind too raw to endure more heartbreak. And so it continued. The phone danced across the counter with notifications, each a reminder that her life was no longer stable. Finally, she swiped to answer one of Michael's calls, desperation fueling her need for answers. His voice came through the line, rough with fatigue. "Jessica? Thank God. I'm sorry about last night. Can we meet somewhere and talk?" She closed her eyes, the memory of Veronica's revelations pounding in her mind. "Is it true?" she whispered. "Everything?" A pause, a ragged exhale. "I'll explain everything, but can we do it in person, please? I need to see you." The pain was too fresh, too pungent. "I can't handle looking at you right now," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But I do want answers." They decided on a neutral location, a quiet corner table at the Glass Garden Cafe, a place Jessica loved for its airy decor and tranquil fountain. By the time she arrived, a grim-faced Michael was already seated, stirring his coffee endlessly. Jessica slid into the seat opposite him, her posture rigid. She could barely meet his gaze. He looked terrible, circles beneath his eyes, hair disheveled. Perhaps he'd slept as little as she had. For the first few seconds, they sat in a painful silence, each swallowing words that refused to come out. Michael finally broke the stalemate. "I know you must hate me," he said, voice trembling. "I'll do anything to fix this, Jess. Just, please let me explain." Jessica wrapped her hands around the warm mug of tea the waitress had just placed in front of her. She'd once taken comfort from Michael's presence, a sense of security in their partnership. Now, she felt only tension. "Start talking," she said in a clipped tone. "And don't lie." He nodded, swallowing. "I met Veronica at a business party last year. She was different, exciting. We started talking, and one thing led to another. It was just meant to be an affair, physical, no emotions involved, but I got pulled in deeper. I don't have a good excuse. I was feeling off in our marriage, like you were drifting away from me. I wanted someone who looked at me like I was still remarkable." Jessica's jaw tightened, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. "So you blame me for your infidelity?" she managed in a sharp whisper. Michael shook his head fervently. "No, that's not what I'm saying. It's not your fault. I'm only explaining what was in my head at the time. I know it's selfish and wrong." Her gaze flicked to the passing pedestrians outside, who walked by obliviously, each living their own lives. "She said you have another mistress," Jessica said, her words feeling heavy. "Is that true?" His face paled, and she saw guilt etched into his features. I didn't mean for it to happen. It started way before Veronica. It's complicated. Jessica's world spun. Another affair before Veronica?" She pressed her fingertips to her temple, a headache building behind her eyes. The betrayal was deeper than she'd imagined, a labyrinth of hidden sins. "Who is she?" Her tone was empty, hollow. Michael looked down, the swirling coffee in his cup reflecting the turmoil in his mind. "Her name is Alyssa. She lives in Chicago. We'd see each other whenever I had business trips there. But that ended a year ago, I swear." Jessica's breath came in shallow bursts. She felt as though a vise was tightening around her lungs. She wanted to scream, or perhaps to run, but she also needed answers, closure, anything to make sense of this chaos. "Why?" she whispered again. "Why do all of this?" He reached across the table, but she snatched her hand away before he could touch it. His fingers curled back, trembling. "I don't know," he admitted, eyes brimming with regret. "I was restless. I chased excitement. I never meant to hurt you like this. You have every right to leave me, Jessica, but I'm asking no. I'm begging, give me a chance to make it right." Jessica stared at him, anger and sorrow warring within her. The man who had once been her biggest ally, her best friend in a cutthroat world, was now a stranger who had shattered her heart. "I don't know if I can," she replied, voice barely audible. "I don't know if I want to." In that raw, excruciating moment, it became starkly clear. The consequences of Michael's betrayal were only just beginning to surface, and the fallout would spread far beyond the two of them. A muffled sob echoed through the lavish dressing room as Jessica Harrington tried, with quivering hands, to pack a weekend bag. She had retreated to the closet suite, adjoining their master bedroom, once a sanctuary of prized designer dresses and shoe collections, to gather her thoughts. Now, every garment she touched seemed infused with memories of a happier marriage, mocking her with their bright colors. Unable to bear the silence of the house, she flicked on the TV in the adjacent bedroom. A news anchor's voice drifted in, announcing stock fluctuations and celebrity breakups. Irrelevant chatter, yet it anchored her to a semblance of normalcy while her life spun out of control. She rummaged for comfortable clothes, scanning the rows of expensive jackets Michael had insisted she buy. Each outfit was a small trophy of their wealth, their polished public persona as the Harringtons' power couple and philanthropic darlings of the city. She wanted to tear them from their hangers, fling them into a bonfire, rage at them for symbolizing a lie. But she knew none of this was the clothes' fault. The anger she felt belonged to Michael's deceit. A light knock on the door startled her. She froze, her breath catching. Maybe Michael had returned early from the office, still desperate to talk. The last thing she wanted was another confrontation right now. She squared her shoulders, prepared to slam the door in his face if it was him. Instead, the door opened to reveal Tracy Caldwell, a dear family friend, and one of the main benefactors of the charity gala that Jessica was organizing. Tracy's kind, motherly demeanor softened the moment. She had apparently let herself in with the spare key. Jessica had given her months ago for emergencies. Seeing Jessica's tear-stained cheeks, Tracy rushed forward, enveloping her in a supportive hug. "My goodness, Jessica, I had no idea things were this bad. Rachel told me something had happened, but not the details," she said softly, rubbing Jessica's back. Jessica burrowed into the warmth of Tracy's embrace, tears escaping her eyes anew. I don't even know where to start," she managed between shaky breaths. Tracy guided her over to the chaise lounge in the bedroom. They sank down together, Jessica holding one of her half-packed duffel bags in her lap like a shield. She explained, haltingly, about Michael's affairs, plural. Tracy listened quietly, eyes growing wide in shock and anger. It felt somewhat cathartic to lay bare her humiliation and heartbreak to someone who wouldn't judge her. "Oh, Jessica," Tracy murmured, patting her hand. "That man has put you through hell. Have you considered your next steps?" "I don't know," Jessica admitted. "Part of me wants to file for divorce immediately. Another part wants to confront him again, to make him tell me everything. Then there's this tiny, irrational part that—" She paused, biting her lip. "That still loves him." Tracy nodded sympathetically. "Love doesn't vanish overnight, dear. But trust is shattered. You need time to process this. And please, don't blame yourself or let him manipulate you. His mistakes are his own." Jessica gazed at the floor, as though searching for answers in the swirls of the Persian rug. "I might stay at Rachel's place for a while, or maybe get a hotel. I can't be here with Michael. But I also can't just run away from my own house, can I?" Tracy squeezed her hand. "You do what you need to heal. If that means leaving this space of shared memories, so be it. And if there's any way I can help arranging a private stay somewhere, even putting you up in my guest house, I will." Moved by the offer, Jessica felt tears sting her eyes again. The swirl of confusion, pain, and residual love for Michael battled within her chest, making each decision feel monumental. She thanked Tracy and promised to keep in touch. The older woman left soon after, instructing Jessica to rest and reminding her that she wasn't alone. Alone again, Jessica resumed packing, more resolute this time. She grabbed essentials, clothes, toiletries, her laptop, and zipped up her bag. The next hour saw her quietly slip out of the house she had once cherished, leaving a note on the kitchen counter for Michael, a single sentence that read, "I need space, don't contact me for a while." As she climbed into her car, the gravity of her decision pressed down. In the rearview mirror, she saw the large, wrought iron gates close behind her, shutting out a life she could no longer call her own. For now, she was heading into an unknown future, clutching onto the hope that somewhere, somehow, she would find clarity amid this devastation. Jessica stared at the swirling patterns in the foam of her latte, the bustle of the small cafe providing a soft cacophony that she found oddly comforting. She had decided against staying with Rachel, not wanting to burden her while she was still recovering from knee surgery. Instead, she rented a suite in a boutique hotel, a cozy hideaway on a quiet street near the city's cultural district. It had been 3 days since she'd left the house. 3 days of deliberately ignoring the flood of calls and messages from Michael. During the first night at the hotel, she had hardly slept, haunted by images of him intertwined with Veronica or whispering sweet nothings to some unknown woman in Chicago. She felt rage, heartbreak, and despite everything, a gnawing sense of longing for the life they once had. This morning, she decided to step out, breathe fresh air, and try to sort through her swirling thoughts in public, where she felt less likely to crumble. She'd found a corner table at the Little Flower Cafe, a bohemian spot with mismatched chairs and local artwork. The environment felt safe, non-judgmental. Somewhere she could be anonymous for an hour or two. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, expecting Michael's name. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. A chill ran through her as she remembered how Veronica first contacted her. Jessica considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of her. The message read, "If you want the whole story about Michael's secret life, meet me at the Redwood Lounge tonight at 8 p.m. Ask for Alyssa." Alyssa, the other mistress. Her heart pounded. Did this woman seriously want to meet her? The notion both terrified and intrigued her. What more could Alyssa know that Jessica didn't? The rational part of her warned that meeting the woman who had also shared her husband's bed might be too painful. But a stronger, needier side argued that information was power. If she was to decide on her future, she needed to know every detail of Michael's betrayals. Before she could overthink it, she typed a reply, "I'll be there." That evening, Jessica arrived at the Redwood Lounge, a dimly lit cocktail bar known for its vintage charm. The scent of old leather and whiskey enveloped her as she pushed open the heavy oak door. The hostess greeted her with a polite smile, and Jessica found her words caught in her throat when she tried to ask for Alyssa. She realized her nerves were on edge, like she was stepping into an alternate reality. She drew a calming breath. Finally, she managed to speak. "I'm looking for someone named Alyssa. She might be expecting me." The hostess nodded. "Yes, ma'am. She's over in the back booth." She gestured toward a secluded corner illuminated by a single overhead light. Jessica's heels clicked against the worn wood floor. Her heart thudded so loudly she wondered if the entire bar could hear it. When she reached the booth, she saw a woman in her late 20s with a halo of curly brown hair, clutching a martini glass as she stared off into space. Dressed in a crisp white blouse and black skirt, Alyssa looked poised, but the dark circles under her eyes spoke volumes about her emotional state. Alyssa offered a guarded smile when Jessica slid into the seat opposite her. She extended a hand. "Jessica, I'm Alyssa Morris. Thank you for coming." Jessica studied her. She wasn't ostentatiously beautiful like Veronica, but there was a gentle warmth in her features that might have appealed to Michael. "Hi," Jessica managed, her palms sweating. "I assume you have some things to tell me about my husband." Alyssa swallowed, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, It ended a year ago, but your husband was once a big part of my life. He made me promises," he said. She faltered, tears glistening in her eyes. "I didn't realize how many lies he was telling until recently. I read about him in the newspapers, about the business expansions, about you two being the philanthropic power couple. I felt so guilty." Jessica's eyes narrowed. Guilty for what? For letting things go on, as long as they did? For believing him when he said he was leaving you? "I truly thought he was separated at one point. He told me you were only married on paper, that you were living separate lives. Looking back, I feel like such a fool. But at the time, I believed every word." Hearing Alyssa's pained confession, Jessica felt a strange surge of empathy. She recognized the heartbreak in the woman's eyes, akin to her own sense of betrayal. "So why contact me now?" Alyssa glanced around to ensure no one was listening, because a few months ago he reached out to me again, tried to rekindle things. He said, "Your marriage was on the rocks, that it was only a matter of time before you two divorced." He was persistent, but I refused. I'd moved on, or at least I thought I had. Jessica's heart sank. "He was cheating on me," with Veronica, while trying to restart things with you, she whispered, the magnitude of Michael's betrayals deepening. She felt physically ill. Alyssa nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Yes, I told him no, but he said he'd call me, text me, send me gifts. I thought you should know that this pattern of his is ongoing. He's not just stepping out with one woman, but multiple. I've reason to believe there might be more we don't know about. The realization stabbed at Jessica's chest. All her illusions about her marriage shattered even more, if that was possible. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling vulnerable. Yet she was grateful for Alyssa's honesty. It was better to know the full extent of Michael's deception than live in the dark. Alyssa downed the rest of her martini and set the glass aside. I'm so sorry for your pain, Jessica. I really am. I never intended to hurt you. If you need any proof, screenshots of messages, anything, I can provide them. I just want closure. Jessica closed her eyes briefly, inhaling the smoky air of the lounge. Part of her wanted to run out the door and never look back. Another part wanted to gather everything Alyssa could give her to confront Michael with undeniable evidence, so he could never talk his way out of this. She opened her eyes, meeting Alyssa's gaze. Yes, please, anything you have. I thank you for meeting me. In that dimly lit booth, two women whose lives had been upended by the same man found a fragile bond. And for Jessica, the last remnants of her trust in Michael Harrington dissolved, replaced by cold resolve to hold him accountable. The next morning, Jessica awakened feeling strangely clear-headed. The Redwood Lounge meeting with Alyssa had been jarring, yet it fortified her resolve. She had to confront Michael properly, armed with the knowledge and evidence she now possessed. She spent the early hours poring over the screenshots Alyssa had sent her, text after text of Michael's insistent pleas for Alyssa to meet him, peppered with empty promises. Jessica felt nauseated reading them, but also oddly empowered. This was proof. She wasn't imagining things or letting jealousy cloud her judgment. The husband she thought she knew was indeed carrying on multiple affairs. Just after 9, as sunlight spilled into her hotel suite, Jessica felt her phone vibrate. Another call from Michael, his name flashing like a torment. This time, she answered with steely determination. "Jessica!" he exclaimed, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God, I've been worried sick. Where are you?" She paused, letting the silence drag. "Somewhere you can't lie to me," she said at last. "I know about your attempt to reconnect with Alyssa. She contacted me." "I've seen the messages, Michael." He started to speak, but she cut him off. "Let's meet at the Caldwell Foundation's office downtown. It's a public place, but we can have some privacy to talk. I'm done hiding. I'm done with secrets. You want a chance to fix this? Show up and be honest." Her voice shook with anger. She ended the call before he could respond. They agreed to meet at noon. Jessica dressed in a tailored black suit, the kind she wore for professional engagements, and armor of sorts. She pulled her hair into a tight ponytail and added minimal makeup, determined to face him unflinchingly. An hour later, she stood in the Caldwell Foundation's boardroom. It was a sleek space with frosted glass walls and a large oak table. The hum of office chatter buzzed outside, a constant reminder that she was in a professional environment, not at home where emotional outbursts could run wild. She chose this venue precisely to maintain composure. Michael entered, looking more disheveled than ever, tie askew, dark stubble on his chin, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He hesitated by the door, uncertain. Seeing him again stirred conflicting emotions in Jessica's chest, heartbreak, anger, and the faint echo of love. "You look good," he said awkwardly, stepping forward. "Jessica, I'm so sorry. Where do we even start?" She gestured for him to sit at the table's far end, ensuring a physical distance between them. She laid the printed screenshots in front of her, tapping them pointedly. "Here's where we start. You told me you ended things with Alyssa over a year ago, But you tried to restart that affair while you were still seeing Veronica. How many more are there, Michael? How many women have you lied to me about? He sank into the chair, raking a hand through his hair. Just those two, he said, eyes downcast. I know I sound ridiculous now, but I swear there's no one else. She studied him, her anger simmering. Why can't I believe you? She asked, more to herself than to him. You've woven such a dense web of lies. Even if you swear it on your life, I have no reason to trust you. Michael nodded, tears welling up. I understand. I know trust is broken. But Jess, these affairs weren't about love. They were about my own insecurities. Our life, our success, it felt like we were drifting. I needed validation, excitement. I made stupid, selfish choices. But I never stopped loving you. Jessica felt her eyes burn, tears threatening, but she blinked them away. You keep saying you love me, yet you betrayed me over and over. That's not love, Michael. He hung his head. I know. I wish I could take it all back. A silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Look, he continued, I'll resign from Harrington Innovations if that's what it takes. I'll go to therapy, anything. Just don't give up on us, please. Jessica let out a trembling breath. The ring on her finger felt like 1,000 pounds, a glaring symbol of vows that now felt meaningless. I'm not making a decision right this moment, she said, her tone measured. But don't think you can waltz back into my life expecting forgiveness. Your actions have consequences. Michael nodded, tears slipping onto his cheeks. If I could move mountains to fix this, I would. She stared at him, not unmoved by his apparent remorse. But she had seen too much pain, too many receipts of his duplicity, to simply allow him to atone in one tearful plea. I've already spoken to a lawyer, she said quietly, watching as his face crumpled. I want to see if legal separation is an option before we decide anything about divorce. We might do counseling if I feel there's any chance, but I will not be rushed. He swallowed, face ashen. I understand. With that, Jessica rose from her seat. She gathered the screenshots and slipped them into a folder. I'm leaving now. I suggest you take a break from Harrington Innovations for a while. Let your board handle things. Use that time to get yourself straight. You can't fix our marriage until you fix whatever's broken inside you. Michael stood as well, voice trembling. I'll do whatever it takes, I promise. Yet promises felt hollow. Jessica walked out of the boardroom, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Though tears pricked her eyes, she held her head high until she reached the elevator. Once inside, she leaned against the metal wall, heart pounding, uncertain whether she was walking away from her marriage forever or stepping onto the first rung of a long, grueling ladder toward a fragile, uncertain reconciliation. 2 weeks elapsed. Jessica remained in her hotel suite, deliberating her next steps. She did meet with an attorney, a poised woman named Simone Fletcher, recommended by her mother, Julia Stone. Simone laid out Jessica's options: a formal separation, a divorce, or an attempt at reconciliation with a legally binding postnuptial agreement, something to protect her interests if Michael relapsed into infidelity. Michael, for his part, vacated their mansion and moved into an extended-stay hotel suite near the Harrington Innovations headquarters. Word around town was that he had taken an indefinite leave of absence, citing personal reasons. Gossip swirled, but the specifics remained a mystery to the public. Meanwhile, Jessica tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. She threw herself into charity work, focusing on the upcoming Caldwell Foundation Gala. The event was a month away, and there was plenty to keep her busy selecting the venue, coordinating with caterers, managing the guest list. Every hour she spent on these tasks was an hour she didn't spend dwelling on Michael's betrayals. Yet the nights brought no relief, her sleep haunted by restless dreams. She'd wake in a cold sweat, the memory of Veronica's cruel smile or Alyssa's tearful confession echoing in her mind. Some nights she dreamed of the early days of her marriage, when Michael was the bright, ambitious young man she adored. She'd awaken, tears soaking her pillow, the heartbreak fresh again. On a brisk Wednesday afternoon, a text flashed on her phone. "Jessica, it's Veronica. We need to talk. Urgent." She nearly dropped the phone. Veronica had been silent since the night Jessica caught Michael in her penthouse. Why reach out now? Jessica's initial instinct was to ignore the message, but curiosity prevailed. "What do you want?" she typed back. Veronica responded immediately. "It's about Michael. He's in danger. Can we meet?" A spike of dread shot through Jessica. In danger was a vague phrase that could mean many things. She wrestled with whether to respond. She felt no desire to see the woman who'd helped shatter her marriage. Yet what if Michael genuinely needed help? They arranged to meet at a public space, a trendy juice bar near the financial district. Jessica arrived first, nerves coiling tight in her stomach. She noticed Veronica the moment she walked in, tall, raven-haired, wearing a crisp designer blazer. She wore oversized sunglasses, as though trying to avoid recognition. They sat in a corner booth with minimal pleasantries. Jessica couldn't help but glare at the woman who had lured Michael away from her dinner that fateful night. But Veronica's expression was uncharacteristically grave. "What's this about, Veronica?" Jessica asked coldly. "What danger is Michael in? Because I'm not interested in more drama." Veronica fiddled with her straw, her voice trembling. "It's not just drama. After that night you found us, I cut ties with Michael. But recently, I got a tip from a source at Harrington Innovations. Something about an investor who's targeting Michael personally, someone who learned about his affairs and is using it against him. There's talk of blackmail or sabotage of some upcoming merger. I'm not entirely sure, but it's serious." Jessica frowned. "Blackmail? By whom?" Veronica shrugged, frustration etched in her features. "I'm trying to find out, but the rumor is that it's someone powerful, a competitor or maybe even a partner, who wants to exploit Michael's vulnerabilities for financial gain. Look, I know you hate me. You have every reason to, but I never wanted him harmed. This is bigger than the three of us." Jessica's thoughts churned. It wasn't surprising that Michael's scandalous personal life could be used against him in a corporate sphere. He had built a multi-million-dollar empire, and enemies were inevitable. "Why come to me?" Jessica asked, her tone still wary. "Why not warn Michael directly?" Veronica lowered her gaze. "He won't take my calls," she admitted quietly. "And even if he did, he wouldn't trust me." "But he might listen to you," Jessica sighed, rubbing her temples. "Honestly, I don't owe him anything right now. He's the one who betrayed me. Why should I risk my peace to protect him from something he brought on himself?" Veronica nodded, acknowledging the fairness of the question. "I get it. But you know, Michael, despite everything, he's worked his entire life to build Harrington Innovations. If this sabotage is real, it could ruin more than just him. Employees, partners, philanthropic programs, everything. And you're still connected to him, even if you end up divorcing. If Harrington Innovations falls, you'll be caught in the crossfire too." Jessica felt a jolt of apprehension. She'd never been in business herself, but she understood the stakes. Countless people depended on Michael's company for their livelihoods. The charitable foundation she was so involved in often partnered with Harrington Innovations to fund community projects. If the corporation collapsed, so would many of the philanthropic ventures dear to her heart. She drew a long breath. "All right, I'll talk to him. But let me be clear, I'm doing this because I don't want innocent people hurt, not because I'm protecting Michael out of some wifely duty." Veronica managed a wan smile. "That's all I ask. Thank you. And I'm sorry for everything. I know it means little now, but I truly am." Jessica, feeling the weight of numerous betrayals, offered no reply. She left the juice bar with her emotions in turmoil, stepping into the crisp afternoon air. Part of her resented being pulled back into Michael's orbit, especially over something so cloak and dagger. But another part recognized the responsibility. She had a role in this, if not for Michael's sake, then for the sake of everyone who stood to lose from his downfall. Thus, Jessica found herself caught in yet another storm, tethered to Michael's complicated life by threads she couldn't easily sever, no matter how much she might want to. Jessica gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled tension as she drove to the Harrington Innovations building, her mind replaying Veronica's words about potential blackmail and sabotage. The towering glass edifice loomed against the skyline, a symbol of Michael's ambition and possibly his downfall. She parked in the VIP section, her old spot from when she frequently visited Michael at the office. Anxiety twisted her stomach as she marched through the impressive lobby. Her heels clicked on the polished marble floor, echoing her determination. The staff recognized her instantly, offering polite nods and sympathetic smiles that hinted they were aware of rumors swirling around the Harrington marriage. She took the elevator to the executive floor. The reception area was sleek, with modern art adorning white walls, a water feature babbling quietly in the corner. The hush of efficient business operations contrasted starkly with Jessica's inner turmoil. Michael was in his private office, temporarily returned from his leave. Upon seeing Jessica walk in, he shot up from behind his glass desk, surprise lighting his tired eyes. "Jessica? I wasn't expecting you." He glanced around, concerned about onlookers. "Is everything okay?" She closed the office door behind her, arms folded. "We need to talk, but first, are you aware someone might be blackmailing you, using your personal indiscretions as leverage?" He blinked, his brow creasing with confusion. "Blackmail? Where is this coming from?" "Veronica reached out to me," Jessica admitted, bracing herself for his reaction. "She claims there's a powerful investor or competitor using your private affairs as a weapon. She seems convinced it's more than idle gossip." Michael's face paled. He slumped into his chair, scrubbing a hand over his mouth. I've heard whispers that the upcoming mergers have hit unexplained snags, but I assumed it was normal corporate rivalry. I've even had a few messages hinting that my personal life could become public knowledge if I don't scrap certain deals. But I thought it was just rumor, empty threats from disgruntled parties. Jessica perched on the edge of a visitor's chair, her posture rigid. "It might not be empty. If people know about your affairs, or worse, if they have proof, they could blow up your reputation. That's enough to kill a merger and tank your stock prices. What's your plan?" He pressed his lips together, fear flickering in his eyes. "I'm not sure. The board is already anxious about the delay in finalizing the Redwood Biotech merger. If these threats have any real teeth, it could collapse everything I've built. I can't let that happen." She nodded. "Your reckless actions put you in this vulnerable position, but I also don't want Harrington Innovations destroyed. Too many people depend on it, including me, in a way." She swallowed, the words bitter on her tongue. "I came here because I need to know what steps you're taking to safeguard the company, and by extension, everyone tied to it." He stood abruptly, pacing near the window. The city sprawled below, a testament to his success. "I'll investigate these threats. I have connections in cybersecurity and crisis management. Maybe I can pay them to find out who's behind this. But it could escalate. If they leak damaging info, the scandal will be national news." Jessica's thoughts churned. "We need to consider possible suspects, business rivals, perhaps Redwood Biotech itself, or some competitor eyeing that merger. Or it could be an internal enemy wanting to sabotage from within." Michael exhaled, panic dancing in his voice. "We have a competitor named Reed Marlowe who's been trying to outbid us for Redwood Biotech. He's known to play dirty. It's possible he discovered my personal issues, or he got wind of them through mutual associates. He's unscrupulous enough to use any advantage. Jessica rose, her eyes steely. Then we have to prepare for the worst. If it goes public, we'll deal with it. I suggest you come clean to your board of directors, or at least warn them that a scandal could be on the horizon. He flinched at the thought. Tell the board about my infidelity. Jessica, they'll lose faith in me. She crossed her arms. They'll lose more faith if a scandal blindsides them, or if they find out you hid it. Either way, it's not about saving face anymore. It's about damage control. He stared at her, shoulders sagging. Okay, he conceded, sounding defeated. I'll call an emergency board meeting. I'll try to get ahead of this. Will you stand by me just for that meeting as a show of unity? It might help the board stay calm. Jessica's breath caught. She remembered their wedding day, how they vowed to support each other through sickness and health, success and failure. Now, in the face of his grievous sins, he was asking for her help in saving his corporate empire. Part of her wanted to turn her back, let him face the consequences alone. But she also recognized the bigger picture. Fine, she said at last, voice quiet but firm. For the company's sake, not for yours. Don't misread this as forgiveness. Relief flooded Michael's expression, but it was tinged with sadness. I understand. Thank you. As Jessica left his office, her heart felt heavier. She was far from forgiving him, and their marriage remained shattered. Yet she found herself re-entering his tumultuous world to prevent a larger disaster. Sometimes life didn't allow clean breaks or easy closure. And so she stepped into the fray once more, holding on to the faint hope that preserving the company's legacy might help her find her own path forward, whether that meant walking beside Michael or leaving him behind forever. A tense hush fell over the top-floor conference room at Harrington Innovations. Board members, investors, and senior managers were all present, their expressions mirroring deep concern. Jessica slipped into a seat near the end of the long table, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Michael stood at the head, shoulders rigid. Thank you for assembling on such short notice. I've just discovered there's a threat against our upcoming Redwood Biotech merger. Someone plans to use personal information about me to disrupt it. A ripple of alarm spread across the room. Warren Fletcher, Michael's mentor, straightened. Is this related to the rumors we've heard? Michael nodded, swallowing hard. Yes. My personal failings, extramarital affairs, are being leveraged to undermine this deal. I take full responsibility. An uneasy silence followed. Finally, Cynthia Lau spoke up, her tone cool. This could shake investor confidence. How do you propose we move forward? Michael's gaze flicked to Jessica, who kept her face impassive. To protect the merger, I'll step aside and appoint an interim CEO if the board agrees. Warren, would you fill that role while I handle the crisis? After a round of tense discussion, the vote passed. Warren Fletcher was named interim CEO, and Michael would focus on damage control. Before adjourning, Michael cleared his throat. I also want to thank Jessica for standing by this company today. She offered no direct acknowledgement, her expression resolute. The board dispersed, directors whispering among themselves as they filed out. Approaching her, Michael spoke softly, exhaustion etched in his features. Thank you for supporting this. I know it isn't easy. Jessica rose, lifting her chin. You owe it to everyone here to fix what you've broken. Don't make me regret being part of this solution. Without waiting for a reply, she exited the conference room. Whispers and curious stares trailed her as she walked away. Though her heart still ached from betrayal, she knew she'd done the right thing, at least for the countless people depending on Harrington Innovations to weather this storm. Time has a way of revealing truths we never expected. Jessica thought her marriage was her safe haven, but it became the storm that tested her limits. Betrayals, secrets, and the hovering threat of scandal pushed her to confront uncomfortable realities and herself. Yet amid the turmoil, a flicker of hope remains, a chance for healing, redemption, or at least clarity. Will Michael truly change, or is his remorse another empty promise? Will Jessica discover a path of independence, or will she rebuild her marriage from the ground up? Only time will tell if love can conquer deceit, or if walking away is the stronger choice. If this story gripped your heart and left you wanting more, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Don't miss out on the next riveting tale of love, betrayal, and unbreakable resilience. Your support helps us keep the drama coming. Stay tuned.